Nathan Rogers here. I'm filling in with Matt Bentley today. Coaches with Coffee. I'm here with the James Krause. James, recently you kind of made news headlines with an interview with another organization about the fact that you've kind of said, you know what, I enjoy coaching more than I like fighting. Talk a little bit about that mindset behind that, and kind of where your head's at with that entire thought process.
Yeah, I've actually been asked that quite a bit lately. I think people take it kind of miscued, I guess. I still enjoy competing. I still like to fight. Still plan on fighting. I think just for me, I thoroughly enjoy getting. I get a lot of fulfillment out of helping other people, coach. I think it's something that I think I'm a better coach than I am a fighter. It's something that I've always done. I've been coaching since way before I should have been coaching. But yeah, it's like I think it's like the next step for me, the next transition. When I'm done fighting, and it's just something I really really enjoy doing. But I still like to compete. I still am very much in it. I train every day, twice a day. I mean, like, I don't know, I'm on a 5-fight win streak. I just beat a top 25 opponent, going up a weight class. Like, I don't know what else I need to do to let people know I'm still in the mix. You know what I mean? Like, so, but yeah, it's just something I really enjoy doing.
Well, this is something that you and I have had a conversation about before, is that you put yourself in a position where you can take fights when you want to fight, where a lot of guys are having to fight to be able to pay the bills and stuff like that. I mean, you've made a lot of good decisions. I mean, you're running a gym, you're coaching, you have some other side businesses. Talk to me a little bit about the thought process that goes into that, and the forethought to be able to take kind of, that, and how you're instilling that into your fighters.
Well, I got into the UFC in 2013. I got really, I don't say lucky, but I got fortunate enough to double bonus. So I think it's really difficult to do now with the performance. Back when I did it, it was sub fight and knockout of the night. But I just never really felt I've never felt secure with my position, my job. You know what I mean? I don't like somebody else holding my cards. You know what I mean? And that's how I felt. That's how I felt with the UFC, and that's how I still feel with the UFC. And I think one of the mistake that a lot of the young guys make is when they get to the UFC, it's they feel like they have like this like entitlement that this is it for me. I've made it. This is how it goes, and this is my career now. The problem with that is man, in a matter of, I mean, let's just look at it. I'll just give you a scenario. Like, let's say I win my last fight, and then now I go on a like a 2 or 3 fight losing streak. You can do that in 6 to 9 months. So in 6 to 9 months, like, let's say I fight once every 3 months, and I fight 3 times and I lose all 3. All 3 split decisions. Doesn't matter. So in 9 months' time, I went from being a winner to being cut from the UFC, and like that's just no way. That's no way for me to live, And I know people are gonna say like, oh, well, aren't you confident in your skills? And of course I am, but I refuse to let other people dictate how much food goes on my table, or I just don't want to do that. And not to mention that this is another thing that I don't think we've ever really discussed. Like, as a professional athlete, you have a lot of time. Like, if you're saying I'm a full-time professional athlete, that's all I'm doing is train. You can't train all day every day. You can't. I mean, so like in my downtime, these other guys go home and they eat lunch or whatever it is. They nap. A lot of them go nap. I don't nap. I don't take naps. I don't want to take naps. So I do other things. Everybody has the same amount of time a day. So what you do with those hours, that I think is what sets me apart from a lot of other people. So I just decided to coach. I decided to do some other things that brought in some income and stuff like that. So I think a lot of the young fighters have a very skewed perception of what the UFC is, because the UFC is a business, and they will use you for, and it's not bad. It's just, it is what it is. You know what I mean? Like, this is not a bash on the UFC, but it's a business. They're going to use you to the best of their extent, and you should do the same to them. And if you go into it with that attitude, like, I'm gonna do this for me. You are an employee to the UFC, and that works both ways. The UFC is using you, and until you don't bring them value anymore, you're gone. You know what I mean? Like, if you bring more ticket sales, they're going to take care of you. That's just what it is. It's a business.
Well, and I've talked to some young fighters, and they're like, man, if we get signed to the UFC, man, if I fight 3 times a year and win, I'm making $60,000 a year. That's good money. Yeah. And, I had to take a step back to them and be like, really though, I mean, that's guaranteeing you're winning. If you don't win one of those fights, you're down to 50 grand a year.
Man.
And your time frame doing that career is
Minimal.
5, maybe 10 years. And in that 5 or 10 years, you really should be setting yourself up to make as much money as I'm going to make in my entire career, because that's what you have done.
Yeah.
And I don't think that a lot of, especially the younger kids, they don't really have that forethought.
Yeah.
They see $60,000 a year as being great money. But, really the only guys that are really getting themselves set up for the future in those are those top-level athletes, the John Joneses, the Conor McGregors. They're the only ones that are getting and making enough money that they are set for the rest of their lives.
Of course.
So, you've taken.
But even with that, they're not, though, because, like, if they don't invest that, I mean, shit, more money, more problems. You know what I mean?
Right.
Like, if more money you make, the more things you're going to have to pay for. And first of all, $60,000 is not a lot of money. When I started, it was, but $60,000, like, you can't even support a family on that. Like, really, I mean, you can, but it's not. I mean, you're living in a normal house, like, and you put it perfect. The goal of professional sports for me would be to, obviously, let's put the passion aside. We all do this. If you were making it to a high level in MMA, like, let's be honest, you're not doing it for the money, because there's a road to get there that is full of not much money. So like you said, you got to set yourself up for the 3 to 5 to 6 to 10 or whatever year window you have. You got to set yourself up to do other things. And I think if you're doing anything but that, you're doing yourself a disservice, because, man, I know a lot of guys that at the end of their career, or not even the end, we're talking like 2 or 3 fights away, you can see a point where they're like, oh shit, what I don't have anything to show for what I've done.
And then you end up with guys like Tito or Chuck or Jens Pulver, who's a friend of mine, that kind of reach that end and don't really have a whole lot to show for it. And that's obviously a different era of the sport.
It is.
But, I mean, they kind of reached that end, and we're starting to see that now. And these guys are going for a quick money grab.
Yeah.
Or the other thing is I think a lot of these guys just don't really lose the passion for it either. But I think that's because they haven't found something else to replace that with.
It is the hardest sport. I thoroughly believe it is the hardest sport in the world to quit, because it is the highest highs. Like, if you guys haven't fought at home, like, I can't explain it. There's nothing like it's got to be more powerful than any drug. You know what I mean? Like, there's nothing like winning a fight in front of millions of people and, like, soaking that in. And I get goosebumps just talking about it, because some of my if somebody were asking me what's the biggest accomplishment in your life, it's going to come from fighting. Like my kids and stuff like that. I'm so proud of my kids, but dude, it doesn't take much to make a kid. You know what I mean? Right. You don't have to be anything special. You don't have to work hard to make a kid. So, it's a drug, and they just want that fix again. You know what I mean? So you're right. A lot of them are doing the money grabs, and look, if you can get it, go for it. But for me, I don't want to tarnish whatever legacy I have. Not just for the fans and for myself, but like for my kids. People aren't even talking about the brain damage and stuff like that. For me, that's way more important. Like, if I get rocked or buzzed in sparring, I don't spar for a week. Like, I don't, a couple weeks. I take my time until I feel normal again, and it's really important to me to come out of this sport smarter than I came into it. And I think a lot of, especially the old school guys, are not getting that same experience.
Let's change gears here a little bit. So you get that double bonus in your first UFC fight, and you buy into, at that time it was Grindhouse MMA Gym. Tell me a little bit about the thought process into buying into this gym. It was a somewhat successful gym, but it needed a lot of help when you went in. You rebranded it. You guys changed the name of it.
Yep.
Tell me a little bit about the thought that went into that, and did you go into that with kind of a plan going into it, or was it one of those things that I got some money in my pocket, I want to invest in something? Kind of what was that thought process, and did you walk into it with a plan?
It was a little bit of everything, actually. I was already running the gym. The gym was already open, and I had been running it since pretty much the inception. So, like, I'd already known everything, and when I say known everything, I'd already been doing everything anyway. So, the timing worked out really well, where I had the extra money, and I decided to buy the gym, and it was pretty much like a Hail Mary what I had to have. It was Joe, my partner in KCFA, is my partner in the gym as well. And we were pretty much to a point where it was like, hey, like, we have a month, maybe 2, to make this work. And We just went to work, you know what I mean? Like we made some changes that we felt were necessary, and him and I both are really good at like breaking things down from a business standpoint. Not what do we want, but what do the people want? Just basic things that I think a lot of MMA gyms miss. Like cleanliness is like, if you want kids, you got to bring moms, you got to bring parents. Cleanliness is everything to them. You got to have, like, I know it's some of the hardcore gyms, and trust me, I come from this, so like, you got to have it air conditioned. You got to have it at a reasonable temperature, 70, 72, because nobody wants to sit there for an hour and watch their kids pouring in sweat. Nobody wants to do that. Like, there's little things like that you have to create an atmosphere of family and a welcoming atmosphere, not just for fighters, but for everybody. And that is not easy to do, is creating a culture that says everybody is welcome, but hey, we also have some killers in here too. So that's something that we've really worked hard on, and you'll see on our mats, there'll be my 3.5-year-old, almost 4-year-old daughter is doing jiu-jitsu, and then you'll have 3 or 4 UFC vets on the other side. So it's a pretty cool atmosphere.
Well, I mean, since I've met you guys, you guys went from one facility and moved to another facility, and now you guys have bought your own facility that you're in now. You guys have come a long ways. Yeah. But let's talk a little bit more about the gym thing, because you used to, but you no longer. You do your camps outside of the gym, and so talk to me about kind of that process. You kind of are leaving the kids that you're coaching and stuff like that to go do your camp, which I think is part of the reason why you talk about kind of focusing more on coaching. But talk to me a little about that. You got to Factory X, you train with those guys, Mark Montoya, those guys, great gym. Why is it that you do that? And I also know that you take the other guys with you. They're UFC guys.
Sure.
I know Zach goes out there. I know that Megan goes out there. They're also at your gym.
Yep.
Talk to me a little bit about the thought process behind that. Why you kind of go out there and do that as opposed to just staying home. Because I know it's not easy to leave for weeks on end to go train.
It's not. Really, the answer is pretty simple. Is like you don't see generals of the Army on the front lines. It just doesn't happen. So for me, we have a really good squad of people, but like the respect that I get on the mat is sometimes I can win goes, I can win matches, I can win sparring sessions just from respect alone. You know what I mean? Because they don't. Somebody hits me hard or whatever, they don't want to deal with the fight that's about to be brought to them. But you go somewhere else, they don't give a shit. You know what I mean? Like they'll fight you, and I respect those guys at Factory X for that. But the main reason is with Mark Montoya. Like I feel like there's really good coaches out there, and there's different kinds of coaches. There's technical coaches, good striking coaches, good grappling coaches, and there's good leaders. For me, Mark is really good at the things that amplify me or multiply me as a fighter. He's a phenomenal leader. He's a guy that you want to go to battle for. You want to go win for him, and that right there is so huge. Like when the going gets tough and somebody's telling you, "Hey, get your ass up and get after this dude." Like if you don't respect that person, you're not gonna, subconsciously you can't give him your full effort. But with Mark, you have to answer to him after this, and he's not a guy. He's gonna tell you how it is. If he feels like you fought like shit, you don't want to go to him with bad news. You know what I mean? Like for me, he's like a father figure to me, and he's really changed my life and my outlook on fighting and a bunch of different things. He's been there for me, not just on the mats but off the mats, and he's been a huge part of my career, me growing as a man. And so for me, like I get fulfillment out of like being able to go back to him and be like, all right, let's say, hey, we won, we did this, we did that, so I want to win for him. And that is so huge, because I've been doing this for a long time, and I feel like I know what needs to be done typically. You know what I mean? He doesn't have to tell me, hey, do this, hey, do this, hey, do this. Obviously, there's always little minute situations and stuff like that come into play, but it's more, I want to fight for him. I want to bring the W back to our team, and I think that is huge. And not to mention that he's a phenomenal technical coach as well. Very good at blending, really good, for me, really good range deception and tricky striking, brings, weird angles and stuff, and it fits into my style really well.
That's pretty interesting. Factory X 2 years ago was kind of an unknown, really. The Camozzi brothers were really the only ones in there a couple years ago. What does it mean to be part of that gym kind of having this recent explosion they've had? We talked to Randy Caruso a few weeks ago, and he talked about the fact that they went from a single room to now they're in this huge 20,000 square foot facility. I mean, obviously you've seen a lot of that growth too. What does it mean to be to be a part of that growth there and being able to,
Yeah. No, I knew it was coming. I told him that a few years ago. He runs a really tight ship, and it's some people can't handle it. You know what I mean? Some people can't handle the schedule that he requires, and man, he's on it too. There's no, don't come bullshitting around because he ain't having it. You know what I mean? So, but to answer your question, it means a lot. To be. I feel like if you go ask those guys, I just go there when I do my camp. So I feel like if you ask those guys that, I think I've been a contributing factor to the growth of that team. I don't know to what degree or whatever, but I know whenever I go out there, I feel like the team enjoys me having out there, and I get a lot from them. They get a lot from me. But I feel like it's been really awesome being a part of their growth, and not just the growth of the team, because they're bringing a lot of outside people are coming in. I think that's because of Mark's leadership and coaching, but also the homegrown guys that have been there that weren't anything whenever I walked in there, and now they're in the UFC. And it's really cool seeing the homegrown guys get in too. So that's,
when we talk about those guys, you talk about Yusuf Zalal, you talk about Ian Heinlich, you think about, there's a lot of,
there's some good guys there,
some good guys that are kind of homegrown there. And then, you've also got guys that are in their training. Anthony Smith does his camps out there. Mm-hmm. Zach Cummings.
They have probably like 20 guys in the UFC now. Like their mats are insane. Like this, Eric Anders is there. We said Anthony Smith, myself, Zach Cummings, Ian Devontae Smith, Macy Barber. There's like 10 more that I'm missing that I know. You know what I mean? Like there's a ton of. He probably has close to 20 guys in the UFC now.
So the sport has changed a lot since you were kind of young and on the come up of this sport.
For damn sure.
And you've had to adapt to that. Where do you see the training, and where do you see kind of the future of this going? Obviously it started off as individualized sports, and now it's moved into this more of this MMA thing.
Yeah.
Is it going to be a lot more technical, a lot more tape watching, and kind of focusing more on the opponent? Where do you kind of see the future of this going, and that the next big thing? What do you think that next big evolution of the sport is going to be?
That's hard to answer because there's always trends. You know what I mean? Like recently we had the martial arts trend with Stephen Thompson, Conor McGregor. Like if you rewind a little bit, like jiu-jitsu was the dominating factor, and then the kickboxers that learned how to wrestle, and then the wrestlers come in, and then you know what I mean. So there's a bunch of different trends that you see. I personally think, in my opinion, that where you see the best guys in the world, they're masters at blending it all together now, and that's where I try to evolve my team at, is in the blend. I think that's how you shut a good wrestler down, is blending the striking with the takedown defense, and I think we have a saying in our gym: you need to be able to do everything, everywhere, all the time, and I think that is the future of the sport, where people they can wrestle and punch at the same time, and that's, in my opinion, that's where everything is going. And I do think that if you look at the champions, they're good at one of two things. They're good at either blending the sport in its entirety, amazing, or they're good at keeping the fight in one aspect of the game that they're very good at. So.
Okay, so obviously we can't do Coaches and Coffee or Coaches with Zions.
Yeah.
Which I think these guys need to sponsor you. You've gotten me hooked on this stuff, and every time I see you, you're carrying around a bag of them. So let's go back to that a little bit, though. So you got a lot of younger guys. Talk to me a little bit about some of the younger guys that you have at the gym that you see coming up, and kind of those evolutions that you've seen through those guys.
Yeah, so, we have quite a few guys that for me, like when somebody asks me, like, can you make it or can I make it, I always say yes, because I wasn't anything special when I got started. I wasn't an athlete. I wasn't overly good at fighting. I'd only been in like 1 or 2 fights in my entire life. I just really fell in love with the sport, and I worked harder than most guys. But I think now you're starting to see more athletes come into it, and I think that when you ask me, this kind of goes back to the last question you asked me, is like, where do you see this trend going? You're going to see more guys like your Eric Anders, your Oven St. Perus, those like D1 level athletes. Those guys will start to transition. You look at somebody like Eric Anders, and he is very, very. This is no way a shot at him. He's very green to the sport. Like, he doesn't have a ton of technical prowess, but he's an athlete. He's durable. He's an athlete. He's super headstrong. So I think you're going to see a lot more D1 level athletes transition over. But to answer the question you just asked me, is you've seen a lot of younger guys come in that come from other sports, and you're seeing more athletes join in. And like we have a kid, David Onama, who's actually fighting tonight. He's he's an incredible athlete. He really is. He's an incredible athlete. He has a chip on his shoulder, and he competes. He wants to win every second.
Well, this is a kid that you're telling me about 2 years ago. You said kind of watch this guy.
Yeah, he's good. Man.
And so I've been watching him, and he's phenomenal.
He's very good. And we have quite a few of these guys that, and you never really know who's going to make it though, because you don't know. I always like to see what happens after somebody's first lost. You know what I mean? Like, how do you handle that? Because a lot of guys will go missing for 6 months. How do they handle the adversity? How disciplined are they? Like those things are really, really big to me. David has shown some huge improvements, and I think you'll see it tonight. But he's a very good athlete, and now he's starting to build skill on top of that, which is scary.
That's something that I talk to people a lot about is guys needing to take fights that they can lose.
Of course.
And I feel like
I've been trying to get this kid beat up for 2 years.
I feel like some people just don't quite understand that idea of a fight they can lose. Grant, took an unfortunate loss, and it's one of those things that you learn a lot from that loss. So that's why I feel like these guys need to take the highest level opponents. They're sitting there saying they're ready for the UFC, but they're turning down fights against high level opponents. That doesn't make a lot of sense to me.
Yeah, your goals have to match your actions. You know what I mean? So if you tell me that you want to be in the UFC and you want to train twice a week, like those goals aren't parallel. You're not going to get there. So I think there's different fights. As an amateur, I do believe like that's my goal as an amateur is to get you beat up. Like I want you to fight the best people, and I want to get you tested. You know what I mean? Like how good are you? I want to see. And as a pro, I think everybody as a pro goes through like the first 5 fights is kind of like not gimmies, but definitely matchups that favor them. You know what I mean? And then after that, you start building. And I think that's where a lot of these guys are in the stage of where they try to build their record a little too much, and then they go to ask the UFC like, you haven't fought anybody worth a shit yet. So in my opinion, you typically have to fight somebody of a higher rank, somebody that's beat somebody before you ever get that call in. It seems like as of late, though, that becomes less and less part of the game anymore. Whenever I got in, that was for sure the.
Well, it disappoints me to see MMA kind of going the way of boxing in that aspect. Yeah. That it's kind of like pad that record and get to that 12-0, so the UFC just can't pass you up. But then you go in there that 12-0 and you go get beat up. There's very few guys out there that can protect an 0 record. I mean, Khabib is the only one I can really think of that's never really lost. So I do think taking that loss, but even at the pro level, is a huge learning experience for a guy.
100%. And there's no, if you've ever fought and you've lost, like typically your best learning and your best improvements come from a loss. So I know for me that's definitely been the case. It fires you up, or it makes you break and you quit. You know what I mean? So it's one of the two usually. It provokes emotion. Anytime you provoke emotion, there's usually.
A prime example of that, taking that loss and quitting, is Ronda Rousey. Flipping on a flipping tirade, takes a loss, and then just never. She came back for one more fight, but never really recovered from that loss.
Yeah, and I think somebody like her puts too much expectations. Man, the margin of error in this sport, especially with these D1 level athletes coming over, you know what I mean? Like these guys hit hard, and everybody is getting better. Like this is another thing that we talk about. We talked about trends. I really think, especially starting in the heavyweight division, and I will see it. I think it'll trickle down. The heavier the division, the more I think the faster it's going to happen. But these D1 level athletes come in, and I think you're going to see it become very, very difficult to retain a title for long. At the heavyweights, it's like whoever hits whoever with the right hand first wins.
Right.
You know what I mean? And I think you're going to start to see that with the athletes coming in. It's starting to become the case at 205 now, and then I think it'll trickle down. And at some point it'll die because the smaller guys don't have as much power. But with those athletes transferring over, you're going to see that because those guys. If you think about like when I say D1 level athlete, let's just take like wrestling out of it. Let's just talk about football. If you've been playing football at a high level, if you're a D1, the chances are you've been playing since you were 5.
Right.
And if you're at a college, a D1 level college, like all that is just a science experiment. It's just a bunch of scientists figuring out how to make you the best athlete possible.
Right.
How can you explode the fastest off the line? That's all their only job is. They have millions of dollars dedicated for people to make you the best possible athlete you can be. Now, whenever that transfer is over, instead of how fast can we get this guy to jump off the line, it's how hard can I get him to hit. You know what I mean? And it's all the same movements. It's the same hip you know what I mean? It's all the same thing.
Right.
So guys like OSP and Eric Anders are the two that come to mind that really I like watching both these guys fight, but they're really not they're not super like technical, skilled or anything like that, but they are good because they have hammers. And they're athletes. They know how to scramble. They understand hip positioning. They understand leverage. They understand explosiveness and how to use their body, when to rest, when to go. You know what I mean? Like, they get these things.
Well, they're stinking strong. I mean, I've been on the mat with some really strong guys, and no matter how technical you are, sometimes they just can overpower you. And I'm a big guy, and so, you know, when you have a guy on the mat that's overpowering you, you know, that just can keep you from making any movement, it always makes it difficult to do anything.
Also, experience competing at a high level. Like, those fights don't shake those guys.
Right.
Like if you watch Eric Anders' last fight, Khalil Roundtree, he got smashed for 3 rounds. And the guy, like, there's like 10-8 rounds that the ref's like, the doctor came in, he's like, are you okay? He's like, I'm straight, dog. Like, I'm good. Like, you're not going to shake that guy. He is used to competing at a high level. He wants to win, and he's going to try to win every second, and I respect that so much about those guys. Right. But the experience at the high level is not even fighting at football, basketball, baseball, whatever. That is so big.
We talk about this Eric Anders versus Khalil Roundtree. So this is back to the coaching aspect of it a little bit. So as a coach, when do you say enough is enough for your fighters? You know, when you say, man, you're taking a lot of damage, there's no coming back from this, you know, when do you say that for your fighter at that point?
I don't. I mean, this is a hurt game, man, and we talked about the margin of error being so thin. Like, Eric Anders easily could have won that fight at any moment with a right hand or a left hand or southpaw, so a left hand. I've seen it happen too many times, but you know what I mean? Like, if you want out of the fight, just tap. You know what I mean? It's that easy. That's the fastest way out of a fight is just to tap. If you want out, get out. But I've seen too many people come back from getting their asses whooped to ever stop a fight for them. You know, and I know because I'm in there too, and I would be furious if somebody ever stopped a fight for me. Because if I'm in there and I'm fighting, I want to be in there. So I would never stop a fight for somebody. I've considered it. The thought has ever even crossed my mind twice in 13 years of coaching. So.
Okay. Awesome. Well, man, hey, thanks for sitting down and chatting with me.
Thank you.
It's great to talk with you. Hopefully we get to do this again. And, you know, have a great rest of your day.
Thank you.
Thanks, man.
Yeah.
That was fun.
That was good.
27 minutes.